The cat asleep on your couch right now is, in the eyes of the law, worth almost nothing. You could lose it tomorrow and no court would treat it as a serious crime. But that is a surprisingly modern idea. More than 1,000 years ago, in the kingdoms of medieval Wales, the cat was written directly into the law of the land, not as a pet, as a protected asset with a fixed price, a checklist of qualities it had to meet, and a punishment waiting for anyone who killed one. And that punishment is one of the strangest things you will ever hear attached to a legal code. It involved a dead cat, a clean stone floor, and a slowly rising pile of wheat. People still say this old Welsh law made harming a cat punishable by death. By the end of this, you will know what the law actually said, why a king bothered to write it, and whether that death sentence was ever real. Section 1. The king who wrote it down. His name was Hywel Dda, in English, Hywel the Good. He ruled most of Wales in the first half of the 10th century, which was rare, because Wales in this era was a patchwork of small, quarreling kingdoms that almost never answered to one man. Before Hywel, Welsh law had no pages at all. It lived entirely in memory, carried by trained jurists and bards, recited and passed down by word of mouth for generations. Hywel summoned an assembly of clergy and lawmen to a place called Whitland, and there the scattered customs of the country were gathered, argued over, and finally written down. He died around the year 949 or 950. The legal code that came down through the centuries under his name covered almost everything a kingdom could regulate. The rights of the king, the value of trees, the rules of marriage, and tucked inside all of it, treated with the same seriousness as everything else, was the cat. So, why would a king's law stop to define a house cat? Because in the 10th century, a cat was not decoration. Grain was survival. A barn full of mice and rats meant a hungry winter and a thinner spring. A working cat stood between a household and starvation. The law looked at that animal and saw what it saw in a plow or a bull: essential property. And essential property needed a price. Section 2. What made a cat a cat? That price was fourpence. To understand what that meant, the same law valued a full-grown sheep at fourpence too. A cat reached that full value the moment it became useful. A kitten was worth a single penny from the night it was born until the day its eyes opened. 2 pence from then until it killed its first mouse, and 4 pence after that for the rest of its life. But the law did not stop at pricing the cat. It defined what a cat had to be. To count as a lawful cat, the animal had to see, it had to hear, it had to kill mice, its claws had to be unbroken, and it had to be able to raise its own kittens. And if you bought a cat that failed on any of those points, you were owed a third of the price back. Strip away the medieval language, and that is a warranty. A returns policy for a cat written more than 1,000 years ago. The law went further still. It folded the cat into the legal definition of a place. For a settlement to qualify as a lawful hamlet, it needed 9 buildings, a plow, a kiln, a churn, a bull, a cockerel, a herdsman, and a cat. No cat, and in the eyes of the law, not quite a hamlet. The cat was not a comfort, it was infrastructure. Section 3, the price of a dead cat. So, what happened if you killed one? This is the part people remember, and for once, the strange version is the true one. If a cat that guarded the king's barn was killed or stolen, the law set out a precise ritual for calculating what was owed. The dead cat was lifted up by the very tip of its tail, with its head hanging down to touch a clean, level floor. Then grain was poured over it, wheat steadily heaping up around the suspended body until the pile rose high enough to bury the cat completely and cover the last tip of its tail. However much grain that took, that was the cat's worth, and that was what the guilty party paid. And if they could not produce the grain, the law named a fixed alternative. a milking ewe together with her lamb and her fleece. 1 ewe, 1 lamb, 1 cat's weight in wool for 1 dead cat. The cat's value followed it everywhere in the law, even into the collapse of a marriage. When a Welsh couple divorced, their household was split between them piece by piece, and the cat was on that list of property, counted and assigned like everything else they owned. A cat was worth dividing. A cat was worth arguing over in front of a court. If you are finding this as strange as I did, take a second and subscribe. This channel digs up the untold history of cats every week. Now, the part almost everyone gets wrong. Section 4, was it really punishable by death? You will hear it repeated constantly that under Hywel's law, killing or stealing a cat was punishable by death. It makes for a great headline. But hold it up against the actual law and it falls apart. Welsh law was built around compensation, not execution. When a person was killed, the usual remedy was a payment to the victim's family, not a life taken in return. Capital punishment did exist, but it was rare, and it was kept for very specific situations. Theft could carry a death sentence only if it was done by stealth, only if the thief was caught with the goods still in his hands, and only if those goods were worth more than fourpence. And that is exactly where the story breaks. A cat was worth fourpence, not a penny more. It sat right on the line, never over it. The law that dealt with a dead cat did not call for a rope. It called for a pile of wheat. So, where did the death sentence come from? Most likely from the simple fact that the truth sounds almost too odd to be real, and the phrase punishable by death is an easier thing to repeat than a ritual involving suspended cats and poured grain. But here's the part that genuinely should make you cautious, and it is the most honest thing in this whole story. The law books we can actually hold today were written down around the 13th century. That is roughly 300 years after Hywel Dda was already dead. Historians are confident the core of the law is genuinely ancient, but no surviving page is in Hywel's own hand, and no one can prove that every line about cats is worded exactly as his assembly said it. What can be proven is this: the law is real. The cat clauses are there in ink on aged parchment, and the oldest surviving copy still sits today in the National Library of Wales, where anyone can go and see, written into the legal code of a nation, the price of a cat. Sit with what that means for a moment. A medieval kingdom set out to define itself in law and decided a cat belonged inside that definition, not as an afterthought, as a working member of the household, priced, protected, and accounted for, right alongside the plow and the bull. The cat on your couch is the same animal, same instincts, same job description, just 1,000 years off the clock. If you want more stories like this one, the kind that make you look at your cat a little differently, subscribe and stick around. There is a lot of history asleep on that couch,